On this episode of China Uncensored, Hong Kongers demand help from G20 nations. Police crack down on Un-Independence Day. And a former church leader talks about the role of faith in the Hong Kong protests. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. China has demanded countries around the world not bring up Hong Kong at the G20 summit. But the Hong Kong people have something to say about that. The situation in Hong Kong has become an international embarrassment for the Chinese Communist Party. In early June, 1 million Hong Kongers took to the streets to protest an extradition bill that could allow Hong Kong authorities to send people to mainland China for trial. They saw the bill as a threat to their way of life. Then, after continued protests were met with police firing tear gas and rubber bullets into the crowd, the Hong Kong government announced it would postpone the bill but not officially withdraw it. So, 2 million Hong Kongers took to the streets to protest. People in Hong Kong really don't trust the Chinese Communist Party. So Beijing made some mistakes in how they handled the situation in Hong Kong. And like most of us, they absolutely don't want anyone else bringing up their mistakes. Especially not at the upcoming G20 summit in Osaka, Japan.
What I can tell you for sure is that the G20 will not discuss the Hong Kong issue. We will also not allow G20 to discuss the Hong Kong issue.
The G20 is an annual meeting of the leaders from some of the biggest economies in the world. And these other countries might not be too happy about being told what they can talk about. I mean, no one's ever gotten President Trump to not talk about something he wants to talk about, especially on Twitter. And according to U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Trump is going to discuss Hong Kong with Chinese leader Xi Jinping when they meet during the summit. Ahead of the G20, about 1,500 Hong Kongers spent the day in a marathon march to the consulates of all 20 countries, except, well, China. And while China says Hong Kong is purely an internal affair,
Hong Kong matters are purely an internal affair for China.
Hong Kongers are actually asking for some foreign interference.
Hong Kong is too small for China. We need an international power to help. We need foreign forces to help. As America.
Outside of the U.S. consulate, protest organizers called on the U.S. to use its influence.
In desperation, we seek your engagement and assistance to fight back this authoritarian regime with us. The U.S. State Department expressed grave concern about the situation, and we cannot be more appreciative of the care. We humbly ask that you could further extend our plea to the other heads of states, and particularly President Xi, during the G20 talks, and stand behind Hong Kong's autonomy.
Representatives from 16 of the G20 countries came out to accept letters from the protesters. Protesters were looking to remind these countries that Hong Kong's situation is an international issue, and they had some thoughts about the Chinese regime's demands. What do you think of China telling other countries not to bring up Hong Kong during the G20?
It's not up to China because it's a international conference.
Oh, of course, China cannot dictate the voices or the discussion in the international society.
I feel like the way that they're doing it is actually showing their authoritarian style.
I don't know how they can do that. If any of the leader trying to raise a question, I don't know how they can refuse to answer or just trying to ignore it.
The more you say you should not bring it up, the more you try to conceal what's happening, it brings even more international notice. Yeah.
That's a good point. Maybe the Chinese Communist Party should try some reverse psychology. They could tell everyone they will totally allow the G20 to discuss Hong Kong. Regardless, the Chinese Communist Party won't be too happy about Hong Kongers going around asking other countries to help liberate Hong Kong. Unless they're referring to the People's Liberation Army. But protesters didn't stop with just a marathon petition protest. They also held an online fundraising campaign to buy full-page ads in major international newspapers during the G20. They asked for 3 million Hong Kong dollars. They raised more than 6.7 million in less than 12 hours. So far, they've confirmed ads with the New York Times and the Globe and Mail, among others. Hey, China never said newspapers couldn't talk about Hong Kong, right? Now is not a great time for the Chinese Communist Party. It's not just the massive public displays of civil disobedience in Hong Kong. It's also increased international attention on the persecution of the Uyghurs and organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners. If this continues, the Chinese regime may have to change its strategy from demanding other countries don't bring up its human rights abuses to sticking fingers in its ears and going, la la la, I can't hear you. And coming up after the break, Hong Kongers celebrate their Un-Independence Day. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell, coming to you from Hong Kong. I'm here at the beautiful Victoria Park on this lovely summer day. July 1st is an important day for the city of Hong Kong. It's the Un-Independence Day, when people celebrate the 1997 transition from British colonial rule to communist dictatorship. There were marching bands, crowds cheering, and of course, delicious barbecue, whatever that is. I probably don't want to know. The celebrations began before dawn, when all these happy people gathered for the annual flag-raising ceremony. That's when the Hong Kong government, including the unelected chief executive, raises both the Hong Kong flag and the People's Republic of China flag, to show how happy everyone is to have been handed over from the UK and reunited with the motherland. I'm sure they're all smiling under those masks. Of course, with so many people ready to demonstrate their love for the motherland, the Hong Kong government decided to deploy 5,000 riot police. And layer after layer of barricades. Barricades taller than a man, which meant that Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam had to travel to the ceremony in a boat. But because of the really bad weather, and definitely not for any other reason, the ceremony had to be held inside. Fortunately, the people had their own flag-raising ceremony outside government offices. Only this was the flag they raised. And the real Hong Kong flag was raised at half-mast. People were so moved they were in tears. At least this one guy was. Okay, that might be because of the pepper spray. But that didn't stop the afternoon Un-Independence Day celebrations. 500,000 people marched through the streets, happy to show their true feelings about Hong Kong's leadership. When you think of your chief executive, Carrie Lam, what's the first word that comes to mind?
Selfish, arrogance,
Out of touch, bitch.
no, I would say her.
Yes, the people of Hong Kong can't get enough of their post-colonial government. So much so that they broke into government headquarters and showed both Hong Kong and Beijing what they really thought. But they still remembered to pay for their drinks. These celebrating Hong Kongers left the legislature around midnight. But police decided the party had gone on long enough. And after a long night, finally, people were able to go home and get some sleep. And then Chief Executive Carrie Lam held a press conference in the police headquarters at 4 a.m. Yes, 4 a.m., proving again why she's so beloved. And so the people of Hong Kong have a message for Carrie Lam and the Chinese Communist Party. We will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we protest our Un-Independence Day. And stay tuned after the break. I'll be sitting down with Cardinal Joseph Zen, who talks about the role of the church in the Hong Kong protests. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Joining me is Cardinal Joseph Zen. He's going to talk a little bit about the extradition protests in Hong Kong. Thanks for joining me. I know you and many other religious leaders have come out very strongly against the extradition bill.
Yeah.
And many Christian groups have been very active in protesting it.
Yeah.
Why do you think Hong Kong's Christians have been so motivated to join these extradition bill protests?
Now, you see, in Hong Kong, the Christian religions had a very strong point in education. So we Catholics, we have more than 300 schools That means we have 25% of the school population in our schools. We don't have university because the government was very exclusive. Okay. And so many people pass through our schools. And many influential people in Hong Kong are Christians.
Even Carrie Lam says
yeah, she is also, yeah. Actually, she got baptized just shortly before coming back from Britain. And so they have influence in society. For example, the barristers, many Catholics, and also in the government, like Anson Chan, he was the number 2 in the government. And so it should be natural that the Christians have a part. But the official church in Hong Kong have always been rather, how to say, traditional. That means reluctant to come out for any subject which can be called political. And still some people have the prejudice that we should not join the politics. Now that's ridiculous, because we had an ecumenical council in the 60s, and there in the official document said politics is part of life, because politics means the things which belong to the society, so everybody should join, and so very clearly stated there. But still, you know, I'm really wonder why so many priests are still have such a resistance to go into the politics. Anyway, but people say under the British, you had such good relation with the government. Why now you always fight the government? You say it's not our choice. They are fighting us. And so we have to defend ourselves. And then we have to defend the freedom of people. They were very clever to promise one country, 2 systems. So we take their words seriously. But now they had they went back on their words. So now the situation is terrible, yeah. So this time it's more clear, the participation of the church, yeah.
So you feel in many ways it's the duty of Hong Kong's Christians to come out and stand up.
Sure. We have to come out. Because, you see, we are responsible for the people. So they must see that our teaching about human rights, we believe in those values, you see. And so I don't think we can be neutral to all this. Unfortunately, the organization of the 6 religions is rather conservative. Many times they try to say some things which are neutral, impartial. Now there is a division in the society. We hope everybody can be restrained and come to discuss and to rebuild harmony. That's a empty invitation, according to many, because the situation is really much worse than we can manage only with the goodwill.
So this ties in.
We have to fight.
Yeah. So this ties in very much to the situation Christians are also facing in mainland China.
Now, in mainland China, there is no religious freedom because there is no freedom. People cannot talk as they like. There's no freedom. Okay, now you say, they have solved the problem of poverty. Many people now, okay, that may be true. But You cannot just feed the people. You are not running a farm. You are running a society of human beings. They have their hair, they have their conscience, but they are not allowed to say anything.
And Hong Kong Christians are concerned that could happen here in Hong Kong.
Yes, sure. So I think at this moment we may say it's the only thing which remains for us to be different from other cities of China. So now if they take away, with this legislation, anybody can be brought to China because they have only to present some so-called prima facie evidence. That means even fake evidences is enough. They can force the government to hand those people because the evidence have to be judged at their court, not here. Terrible. So many say it is worse than the so-called the Article 23.
The National Security Bill.
Because that is a law in Hong Kong. So the cases are to be judged in Hong Kong. But now, according to this legislation, the cases will be judged in China. Now you cannot trust.
At this point, do you think if the Hong Kong government withdraws the extradition bill, that will be enough?
I think now the urgent problem is to solve this issue about this extradition law. But I think given all what happened these days, we need much radical thinking about the actual situation because it's really bad. They have sown so much injustices. Now they are harvesting a disaster. And so I really hope it's not only about this law, which should be withdrawn. Otherwise, the people would not believe in what they say. That's the minimum they can do. And then the second thing is to have an independent commission to inquire about what really happened on the day 12th of June. And to know clearly the responsibility of the young people and of the police. And but then the whole thing happened because the whole system is wrong. Because we are feeling so much helplessness. You see this umbrella movement, or this Occupy Center movement. Now, we put so much effort, peaceful effort, to demand that they do what it is being promised in the basic law. To have to let us have a real democratic election, but we are not given. They are closing all the doors, and so we have to go back to that. So and then after that, they did so many things. We are just to bear, and so they disqualify some democratically elected legislators. And they bring to the court people who peacefully made some demands to the government. And we just accept all that peacefully. But at a certain moment, there's so much anger in the people. And we have to thank those three promoters of the Occupy Center movement because they preached peace, non-violence all the time. I think the whole world should admire how we can have a march of 1 million and more than 1 million people with no incident at all. You see? And so really they have to face their responsibility. They took advantage of our peaceful nature. I think in this moment we are very much worried that the young people may not be able to be so patient. And so the government is provoking them to violence. And the police, we don't recognize those police as Hong Kong police. Terrible. They look like the public security in China. Incredible.
So you've been a religious leader your entire...
I am a retired bishop, but you see, because what we are doing is according to the teaching of the church. Now the bishops, they have a retirement for the office, but not from the duty of preaching the doctrine of the church. So I have still the duty to preach the doctrine of the church. I think what they are trying to do is against the human rights, against teaching of the church.
And your religion, your faith, is what motivates you to stand up to this?
Sure, yeah. Actually, the human rights belong to human beings. It's not exclusive to believers. But then we have also a church who helps us to see clearly such doctrine. Yeah, and especially the recent popes. We have so many wonderful documents of the church, encyclicals, teaching about human rights.
And so as somebody who has been a religious leader for so many years, what advice would you give to people standing up to tyranny, both Christian and non-Christian alike?
I think it's a duty for people who are so privileged to know very clearly this doctrine about human nature, about the human rights, about how the society should be run, what is the authority, what are the duties of those in authority. And so we must share our knowledge, our conviction, our values with the people who are less privileged. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.
Viewers have described China Uncensored like The Daily Show, but about China.
In China, something can be illegal, but still in common practice. For example, bribery, or intellectual property theft, or Uber. But you know, there's a common Chinese saying, "La schmaz." What's that, Shelley? Oh, okay. I'm being told no Chinese people ever say that.
At the beginning, I was super excited when I got 500 views on an episode, and now the show's grown to about 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. One episode reached 7.9 million people and counting.
Ride in luxury to your destination in only double the amount of time it would take you to fly there. Dreams come true. And China is the little engine that could.
I'm a little freaked out that many people have seen my face.
Kind of ironic that I'm the minority in a show about China. People in the comments, they'll be like, "You're a traitor." I'm being a patriot. This is my way of showing that I love the country that I came from.
Matt, Shelley, and I went to the Philippines to disputed waters, the Scarborough Shoal.
China and the Philippines claim the Scarborough Shoal. The Chinese military is asserting its claims in the South China Sea, so there's a dispute.
We had to take a rickety little Filipino fishing boat surrounded by threatening Chinese Coast Guard vessels.
Chris planted the China Uncensored flag, and then we got away with it. Chris, Shelley, our cameraman, and I went to the Waldorf Astoria in New York, hoping to interview the leader of China, Xi Jinping.
Oh, we are being held. I'm going to...
What is it, China Uncensored?
China Uncensored, yeah.
Down the stairs.
The lead security guard followed us out and said we were banned for life from the Waldorf Astoria.
Chris Chappell here right outside of Mongkok. Our camera guy is in there right now. He's seen people getting beat by police. Police are trying to tear down the tents. Things are wild now.
People would say things to us like, "My professor plays China Uncensored for our class." To see people really believe in what we were talking about was life-changing for all of us.
One word you would use to describe Chris Chappell.
Committed.
Hilarious.
Engaging. Intriguing.
Have you heard of China Uncensored? Great comedy show. Hey, have you heard of China Uncensored? It's starring me.
It's more and more obvious that China is having a major influence on the U.S.
The way that the U.S. is treating China now, it will start to affect people's lives, and they'll need somewhere to go to learn about that.
Hey, have you heard of China Uncensored? 中国解密.
In 5 years, I see China Uncensored as the only show available on TV or the internet. It will be the sole source of edutainment worldwide.
Have you heard of China Uncensored?
Yeah,
You actually have? He's heard of China Uncensored.
I love China Uncensored.